everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is U.S. visa and nationality lawyer Janice Flynn. Janice is located in London. Janice, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. It's good to see you.
Of course, I want to get your take on some comments from the former president. Over the past weekend, former President Donald Trump floated the idea of potentially deporting Prince Harry. He said this, of course, with the caveat, if he wins the 2024 presidential election. Trump said this, quote, "I wouldn't protect him. He betrayed the Queen. That's unforgivable." And quote, "He would be on his own if it was down to me." As an attorney who focuses on visas, what do you make of the former president's comments?
Well, that particular quote that I've seen is interesting because it doesn't make someone inadmissible to betray your queen. That's not a basis to deport someone from the United States. There's other bases to remove people from the United States, but that particular quote didn't make any sense. Why that could result in a deportation of an individual because they betrayed their grandmother.
So that quote doesn't make sense. Trump wouldn't have legal standing because Trump believes that he betrayed the Queen. But does Trump have any legal way, should he be president, to deport Prince Harry?
Not that we know of. I didn't assist Prince Harry with his visa application. I'm not even quite sure exactly. We don't know definitely which visa he's in the United States. I believe it's a temporary non-immigrant visa. And when somebody applies for that, they have to answer questions in a visa application form. The consular officer can make inquiries to them and make a decision based on the facts presented to them, and also the answer, in the application, plus also any questions that Prince Harry had to answer when he was interviewed, because you have to appear in person for an interview. So, I can't see a basis that we don't know for sure what allegations or what he may have admitted to something in his book or something like that, but he may or may not have disclosed that. And in addition, we've got in U.S. immigration law, or it's in federal law, the idea of consular non-reviewability, where you can't question a consular officer or appeal a consular officer's decision. And that would apply also to the president, and they can make a decision, but we don't know for sure what he admitted to, and maybe the consular officer had the chance to answer whatever questions they had to answer. They had at that time.
Let's take a step back here. As you said, we don't know for certain what visa Prince Harry used to get here, but what are the potential options?
Well, there's, what I've read is maybe there's an O1, they're all non-immigrant visa categories. And in the visa type that he may have gone on doesn't really matter as much, because someone may qualify for a visa, but maybe they're inadmissible to the United States for whatever reason. Maybe they've got a conviction for theft or a controlled substance violation or some other kind of immigration violation that makes them inadmissible to the States. And so if whatever visa he applied for, as long as that officer determined he was, at the same time when he applied for his visa, they would determine whether he qualified for that temporary visa. I'm assuming I think it was a temporary visa. And then at the second consideration a consular officer should have is whether that person's admissible to the United States. Can they let him in, for whatever reason? And so that determination was made at the time he applied for his visa.
The conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, filed a lawsuit for access to Prince Harry's immigration documents because he made an admission in his book, Spare, that he did use drugs in the past. A, does this lawsuit have legs? And B, could Prince Harry be deported based on things he admitted in his book?
Person if they're going to be deported, they have to be deported based on facts and it is a process. Someone would have to be admitted into immigration court, going through a process where the government would have to present facts that somebody is now inadmissible. That's how it is for everybody who enters the U.S. under a visa. If they say become inadmissible, or if they were convicted And if he was brought into deportation and then it was found, then that could possibly result in if he is deported. But um, I don't. We don't know for sure what he admitted to or what he said. And the other thing that I was going to mention is that when somebody applies for a temporary work visa or whatever kind of temporary visa, they may also be granted a waiver of inadmissibility. So that's another thing that we have no idea. Maybe that was already admitted to or explained or at the time of his interview. So
Can you dive a little deeper there? What is that waiver of inadmissibility?
the waiver of, so if somebody is found to be inadmissible to the U.S. for whatever reason, a crime involving moral turpitude or for the controlled substance violation or other things, they admit to it or they explain it, and then a consular officer may within his or her discretion decide to grant a waiver of inadmissibility, or not. They don't have the power to grant it, but it's a two-step process where they interview the person. They're the representatives who are in that country where the visa applicant is applying, and they can make a determination of whether this person is one. What is it, the reason they're going to the United States? What kind of contribution are they going to give to the United States? Have they been rehabilitated? Have they been, if somebody admits to drug abuse, can they show that it's been more than 1 year and they've gone into what in CDC guidelines talk about as remission, where it's been more than 12 months since they've engaged in sort of what's considered harmful behaviors, such as abusing drugs or alcohol-related offenses and things like that.
Since Prince Harry, as we know, is married to a U.S. citizen, is it harder to deport someone when they're married to a citizen?
In terms of my personal practice, I haven't had to deal with deportation, but I believe that it is a basis to argue that someone should be able to remain in the United States, especially with the connection of having a spouse who's a U.S. citizen.
Prince Harry said on Good Morning America earlier in February that he thought about the idea of becoming a citizen, but, quote, "it's not something that is a high priority for me right now." Considering he is from the royal family, is that harder, an obstacle for him to become a U.S. citizen?
Well, first, if someone wants to become a U.S. citizen, they have to first become a permanent resident, a lawful permanent resident, be a green card holder. And so we don't know for sure. Well, I haven't seen anything for sure whether he is now a lawful permanent resident, and then and if he's married to a U.S. citizen, once he has what's called a green card, he can then apply to naturalize as a U.S. citizen 3 years after that. And then the next considerations is, all right, well, there in U.S. considerations, you can be a U.S. citizen, and then it's I don't know enough about UK nationality law or what other layers. Well, I know British citizens. I work with British citizens who naturalize as American citizens all the time. But if he is head of state, or I don't know what his technical, at this point, I'm not sure what his technical title is under the UK royal family or anything. I don't know. And that maybe that's what's given him pause, because US citizens can become British and British can become American, vice versa, and you can hold dual nationality. So there's no issue with that. But becoming a US citizen is a very personal thing. And even though you can be a dual national, it can be a very kind of heartrending thing to kind of almost let go of his Britishness. I'm just guessing that maybe that's what it is, or maybe he is just waiting until he's a permanent resident, and then after a few years after that, he can then become naturalized as American. And I think there are considerations maybe he would need to make about being, a member of royalty or having that kind of title. Because in British, I've worked with people who are, lords or ladies who are both dual nationals. So I know it's possible, but they have different titles in their British passports, and it's a different kind of thing. And that is sort of beyond my expertise in terms of what the UK issues are, and maybe it's constitutional issues in the UK. I'm not quite sure, but in terms of, I saw that quote where he was talking about whether he'd consider, and that's lots and lots of British or foreign nationals who enter the United States. They have the ability to naturalize as a U.S. citizen, but then it's a very personal thing to become a citizen of a country, and maybe there are this may not be particular to Harry, but there's a lot of high net worth individuals for tax reasons that would give them pause to become a U.S. citizen as well. So I don't read anything into it as being an issue. It could be similar thing where you have people who are very well off who would decide on holding off and becoming a citizen until they knew they had their tax affairs sorted out, or it's in a way it's harder to get. He could become naturalized, but then it's a process to actually renounce your U.S. citizenship for tax purposes. And so sometimes with my clients, I would say, think about it before you naturalize. Is that what you want to do? Are you going to spend the rest of your life in the United States? And again, it's a personal thing. If someone feels really connected to America, maybe they will do that, naturalize. But it's also if they know that, maybe they will go back to their home country, or they'll go to another country. And so it's not necessarily, you can't read anything to him saying that. And we don't know what's going on in his mind either. So
through the lens of an attorney, then, in light of the former president's recent comments floating the idea of a deportation should he be reelected, do you think that becoming a U.S. citizen should be more of a priority for Prince Harry? Or do you think those comments are baseless, they have no merit here?
Well, like I said, for what I've just been explaining, it's such a personal thing to become a citizen of another country. And, I've been living in the United Kingdom for 18 years and I haven't become British. And so it's a personal thing, but it's also, there's lots of other layers of things, I don't need to do that, but then the same for other people. So no, I wouldn't. I don't see what the issue is with that at all.
As a lawyer who specializes in U.S. visa and nationality, what do you think then is missing from this conversation when it comes to these types of comments?
I think what's missing is realizing the process that someone has to go through to apply for a visa. They have to appear for an interview. They have to fill out an application. They have to review the application. We have to assume that he reviewed the application. But even then, when somebody appears for an interview at the U.S. Embassy in London or wherever, they have to raise their right hand and promise to tell the truth, and they do that. And there is that process. And it's the sort of understanding that somebody's gone through this process. And it's also that the consular officers, the ones that I don't hang out with consular officers, but when you do talk to them and when they're reviewing these applications, I think that's what's not being discussed. And it's also like having a full understanding of the process for someone to obtain a visa, and knowing that there are ways, to say that somebody's going to be deported, but everybody in the United States has rights to be able, if they're going to have that visa status taken from them, or if they're going to be forced to leave the country, there is due process. It may take a long time, and you have to go through what's called deportation and go through the immigration courts. And that's what needs to be understood. And also there was another quote that I saw that said, I think Trump said that he wasn't going to protect Harry like Biden has. And I don't know for sure. We don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other things going on besides worrying about one visa application at the possibly U.S. Embassy in London, and assuming that it's the job of the consular officers to make those determinations. And again, going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, there's the idea of consular non-reviewability, where you can't open up And that's what I find interesting. And that's what I don't think, if they want to open this Heritage Foundation, if they want to open that up, there's a case called Matter of Din where they wouldn't open up, a U.S. citizen was arguing that the U.S. Department of State should explain why her husband was denied a visa, and they wouldn't explain. The consular office, they wouldn't get an explanation about the decision or why the decision was made. So again, that's the thing. To get back to your question, is that's the thing that I'd want to say. Okay, well, if they are able to open up that, then why can't we then? They're going to really open up the box of consular non-reviewability, which from my perspective might be great, because then if they can do that for Prince Harry, where it's almost the reverse of it, but that's why I think it probably won't fly, and the Department of State would not want that, and it would make a lot more difficult for visa application review and things like that, for if they are able to open up the application. Not to mention, there is, and I looked at it in terms of, this was kind of related as well, is that I looked at it in terms of, it's kind of a related issue where Customs and Border Protection, those officers at the border, and what it takes if somebody owes taxes to the IRS. And between all the different agencies, there's this idea of privacy, and they wouldn't share information and things like that. So that's the other issue. And so it's consular non-reviewability, and then all the privacy issues. If they want to open it up, if they are really successful, if a U.S. citizen can't open up her husband's decision or get an answer from her husband's decision, I don't see how the Heritage Foundation is going to be able to open up and find out information about Prince Harry's visa application.
I do want to go back to that quote you touched on that President Trump said about President Biden. He said the Biden administration has, quote, been too gracious to him meaning Prince Harry, after what he has done. What do you make of that comment specifically? Is there any truth to that? Does that make sense to you as an attorney here?
It's something that doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know if they've met each other or anything like that. That's what I really don't understand, is that's why I said one of the things that I'd want to talk about is the process. And there's millions of visa applications made probably every year. And this was one application, and I think that consular officer, whoever they were who interviewed him, decided to approve the application. And unless Prince Harry and Biden have met, maybe they've been nice to each other. We don't know, but I really don't understand what Biden being gracious to Prince Harry has to do with any of this. There was a decision made at the U.S. Embassy in London, and that was it. It was approved, and that's all there is to it. And I haven't seen anything in the news, unless you have, about what Biden has showed any favorability. But in addition, I've worked with, when we've had a difficult application or we're trying to move things along, even if we have congressional help. So in a similar way, I haven't had a case where the president got involved, but where we would have congressional help, and consular officers still have the freedom to make their own decision. And while they will listen to a congressperson or their office, they will take that in consideration, but they still have the autonomy to make their own decision. And I think that's the main thing, is I haven't seen any evidence that Biden played any favorites or anything out of the millions of people who have applied for visas. And this is one individual who applied for a visa. And so I don't really understand where that comment has come from. So, or the reasoning behind it.
So it's up to the counselor, not President Biden himself, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Because it's the same thing as if when the congressperson's office would contact the U.S. consular post to say what's going on. The consular officer will be courteous, and then they take it in consideration. But again, there's no evidence. There's nothing to ever demonstrate that that was even occurred in this application. I didn't represent Prince Harry, but I'm assuming whatever visa he applied for, I'm assuming it was a temporary visa. He may have appeared, well, he would have had to appear for an in-person interview. He would have been interviewed by a consular officer. And that officer has the autonomy and the ability to make the decision they wish to make on that application.
Janice Flynn, I really appreciate your insights, your reaction to these comments. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.